The long jump. So when we talk about the long jump, there's a lot of properties, a lot of different moving parts that make it a very complicated event. And although it's fun to fly through the air just for a quick second or maybe even less, there's a lot of moving parts that we need to be aware of in order to stay safe and in order to be able to control what we're doing, both on the runway, both on the board, and in the air and into the sand. So we're going to cover topics like running fast, speed, mechanics, collision control, and more. All right, so what is the long jump? At the end of the day, a lot of people get this confused, but the long jump is a horizontal jump. Okay, this means to go forward. So it's not a vertical jump like the high jump, right? So what helps us go forward? There's speed, there's continuation of movement, there's energy transfer and collision control, technique, and air mechanics. And we're going to take the time to dive into all of these. And all of these have a moving part in what makes a successful long jump. So there's technique and air mechanics, right? What we do in the air is important. There's gravity. Yeah, there's gravity on the earth, which sucks, right? I wish we could fly. Or I wish humans were just built better, right? We had wings or something. But unfortunately, we don't. And we have to rely on a lot of different things in order to get air. But gravity is the natural force of the earth that attracts matter, matter being us humans, right? So it's our job to fight the gravity. This is a lot, more difficult than just being said. But just thinking about staying in the air and enjoying the flight, allowing yourself to be free in movement and space. This is huge, and it may sound holistic or spiritual, but it's facts. And just being able to think about staying tall in the air and making sure you're in upright positions and flying, right? Spreading your wings and allowing gravity to do its job, and slow its job, slow its roll as it's pulling you down back to the earth. So there's a lot of different ways how you go about fighting gravity in the air, and a lot of this is preference. A lot of this is an acquired or an acquisition of skill, what you practice the most and what you feel more comfortable doing. But you can hitch one time, you can hitch multiple times, you can do the hang technique, or you can do the sail technique. And I'll be coming out with videos on how to go about doing all of those. This is just kind of an overview of the long jump and what you can do and all the moving parts that it includes. So our number one goal is to fight gravity for as long as possible and to just enjoy the flight. We're just fighting gravity. That's all we're doing. Physics. There's speed, right? And speed is so important. However, speed has a little bit of a confused role in some of our minds as athletes and coaches. So our approach is to be fast, yet fast enough for the athlete to be able to control it at the board, right? So we want to be able to move very quickly, right? However, if we're not able to control that collision at the board, speed is actually going to be used to hurt us, right? So we got to be able to run fast enough to be able to control it right at the board, at the point of contact, at the point of force. Upright max velocity position, so chest tall, arms up, feet up, getting your feet back down to the ground, applying quick forces, staying up tall, hips in a nice position. Rhythm. So let me explain this to you. So sprinting a 100-meter dash or a 40-yard dash is a lot different than your sprinting approach or strategy when you're on the runway. So when you're on the runway, you want to be able to build your elastic properties and stay rhythmic. So personally, I like to take a good 4 steps of bounding in the beginning of my approach, just in order for me to gain rhythm into my run. And then from there on out, my cadence slowly increases as I increase my frequency as I approach the board, because you want to be as fast as possible at the board. Doesn't matter what you do in the back end. If you're moving quick back then, and then you get to the board and you move slow, you just went against, your goal, and your goal is to be as fast as possible at that board. I don't know if anybody has ever seen somebody go ahead and dunk a basketball, but they take a couple false steps in the beginning. They might skip, then might jump a little bit, bound, and then they go pop, 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 jump off 2 or 1 feet. They're gaining their rhythm. Whether they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, the body likes rhythm, and it's a great strategy for it to produce the right forces. So Finding your speed can be tricky. However, this is where practice comes into play. So I like to practice approaches from 3 steps. So that's 6 total steps, either right or left. And then each week I increase the amount of steps I do. So week 1, 3 step, week 2, 4 step. I might stay a couple weeks at 4 steps. And then week 3, I'll go on to 5 steps. Might have to stop there for a few, get the acquired forces, the acquired speed in order for the athlete to feel comfortable before they go on to 6. So on and so forth until you get to 9 steps. If during the process you see, this is where the coach's eye comes into play, and the athlete's awareness. If you see that the athlete is not comfortable at any point throughout the process, so if, let's say, for example, at 6 steps, 12 total steps, the athlete does not feel comfortable handling the speed into the board, that's where you stop them, and that's where you practice 5 steps until they get the acquisition of skill and the comfortability moving through the board at that velocity. 1 week at a time, and this is where your coach comes into play. All right. Video comes into play, analyzing, being aware of your body and how you feel comfortable. So this is where we learn what speed are you able to hit at the board and not slow down. Yeah, it's great if Greg Rutherford can do 10 steps and run through the board as hard as he can, but he can also deadlift almost 700 pounds and squat like 3 times his body weight. And he's been long jumping for a long period of time and doing all these elastic property-driven exercises and plyos and so on and so forth. He's had so much experience doing the event itself. So for him, he's in an own category of himself. I know I say study success because success leaves clues. However, we also have to be realistic in where you are at in terms of your demand and skill level. So like I said, speed is important. It's an important property. However, it only does take 11 seconds in the 100 meter to jump 25 feet. I acquired this information from an Olympic level coach. Strength properties, athleticism, technique, acquisition of skill, and collision management all play a role in the distance of your job. And your job is to jump far. Everything has a little bit of a moving part, like I said in the beginning. Your job is to run fast, but to be able to handle your speed. So this is where speed comes into play. Continuation of movement. So everybody's heard the penultimate step. Drop that penultimate step. That's all I hear, right? So the penultimate step, for those who don't know, the clinical term for it is, the definition is second to last step before the jump. Okay. There's many moving parts to this as well. So your penultimate step needs to be a flat contact. You want to make sure you contact the ground, not heel first so much, but just think about pawing the ground with a flat contact. All right, this is going to enable us to roll through or over the foot. The reason being, this creates a fast and continuated movement. So we're not looking to push off the toe and get over to the jump foot. By doing so, this causes massive deceleration properties to occur, and it isn't too healthy for your Achilles to push at that fast velocity into the jump foot. You want to create a collision on the penultimate step just to roll through and continue the speed and the velocity you created on your run in order to get through to the jump foot. Also on that penultimate step, you want a positive shin angle. The shin is to be directed in a horizontal vector in order to correlate the horizontal goal you have of jumping out into the furthest distance you can. So if you're trying to jump out, the shin angle has to match that property, and that's where the force comes from, right? We're not looking to push. The shin angle is just going to drop and continue the movement, and once it drops, you're going to land on that foot to jump, and it's going to continue that speed and velocity you built up behind you. Now, this is huge. The hip position. I see this a lot. People think you need to dunk or sink the hips too low, but by doing this, you are decelerating very, very fast and not continuing to add velocity through the board. So we're not thinking about sinking things down and slowing down. If you ever see a football player run a route, or they run a slant or a hitch route, they have to lower their center of gravity in order to stop their velocity and change directions. And that's all about decelerating. The goal of a horizontal jump like this is to accelerate into the board. So by sinking the hips and dunking the hips down, we're actually decelerating, and we're not continuing our velocity and not continuing movement. The last property is just to be ready for the board and use all your appendages, your arms, your knees, your feet, your body to go horizontal out to the pit. And this is where technique comes into play. This is where acquisition of skill comes into play. Practicing the hitch, using your arms, hanging in the air, throwing the feet forward, right? Just continuing the movement into the air, because the jump's not over when you get into the air. It just doesn't end at the board. You got to be able to continue the movement. This is huge. Energy transfer and collision control. So energy transfer. The definition of this is the movement of energy from one location to the other, right? So energy transfers occurs both internally and externally. Internally, neural and electrical energy information and impulses are being interpreted from the nervous system to orient or create itself in terms of movement. We rely on our nervous system to quickly pulse and relay the stimulus and stresses that need to be dealt with, aka the jump. So when you hit the board and everything's going, your brain and your nervous system we're interpreting everything that's going on. How fast we're hitting the ground. How did we hit the ground? Are we sinking? Are we spending too much time on the ground? We have to recover. We have to get back up. All of these things are being interpreted. And if we're not on point with how well rested we are and how active our nervous system is, the electrical energy can't be relayed or transferred properly. And this can cause for, like I said, at the bottom of this slide, I'm going to go over what some of the causes are, but this can cause for injury and this can cause for just a bad jump. You're just not on point. But these demands don't only occur within the nervous system, they also occur within the muscular system, so the kinetic chain and the tendons. So the long jump demands that we sprint fast, collide with the board on one leg with extreme amounts of braking force, and then propel the velocity we generated and the body weight we carry through gravity and space and then land. Sounds simple, right? Not really, right? So if we're unable to handle these braking forces that we talk about when we hit the board, the most important transfer through the energy of the foot to the Achilles, to the knee, then to the hip, to the psoas, to the back, to the core, and through the nervous system. The consequences can include injury or a bad jump. So being able to transfer energy through the foot and through the whole entire chain is a big thing. And if we're not ready for that here, or we're not ready for that here by practicing the specialized event itself through one leg, unilaterally speaking, you're not going to be able to control your collision. So even though the bigger collision leads to a bigger jump, we need to be able to handle the bigger collision. So control is the important key. And that's all I got for the long jump. We're going to dive into these topics a little bit more in depth and detail, but I figured I'd give you a little bit of an overview of how the long jump is kind of oriented and how I approach it. All right. Peace.